Did anyone have any questions that might have popped into their head in the last hour?
I think a lot of it, I think you might go into more detail now, like that sharing feature, as well as some of those
Okay.
templates areas.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, we'll go over it, and at the end, like if there's anything that I didn't cover, we can definitely go over that. And I was looking into the program merge as well. And it looks like, so basically it has two functions, and I also in Asana created a task and I linked you to it just so you had that information. Um, so the program merge has two functions, which is merge. So that is like what we went over. If, say, a member of a household was enrolled individually in a program and the rest of the household had a program enrollment, they could be merged together into one household enrollment. So that is the merge function. And then the move function is, say, a client was enrolled in the wrong program, like they were enrolled in transitional housing A and they should have been enrolled in transitional housing B. Their program enrollment can move to the correct program as long as both of the programs are using the same program template. So that is that functionality within that
So for
section.
for that, we as system admins are the only people that can actually move them from program A to B. Like, or else
Correct.
they would have to possibly enroll them again in that other program and then possibly
Hmm.
delete the other entry, or no?
Correct. That's so that can be done. And that's also dependent on access roles. If you want to set like your agency managers with like delete access for program enrollments, or if only the system admin should have that delete access to delete program enrollments. But yes, like only the system admins have the merge functionality in
Okay.
there. Yep.
And then depending on their roles, then they could also possibly do it on their end, but in a different way.
Yeah, they could finagle it
Yeah.
with like dependent on their access role.
Okay.
Yep. And then one other system admin function I did not go over is there should be there isn't right now because we haven't deleted anything, but there's like a delete data button that could appear within the search screen. And so say if like a client was accidentally deleted or something, you can uncover deleted data. So actually, you know what? I'm gonna just delete out test client to show you that. I'm just gonna delete this client. Cool. So test client has been deleted. Oops, shouldn't have deleted him. So you could just click all system admins have recovered deleted data that you could click right here and you can restore the client there. So that is another system admin function that we have. Um, but anyway, so I'm going to mute everyone again. So feel free to type in the chat bar any questions, and we'll have a Q&A question at the end of the session. So what we'll go over now is all the items within the Manage button in the launcher. So we're going to go over configuring agencies and sites, configuring accounts and funding, which can get linked to services, configuring assessments and forms, configuring programs, configuring services, configuring user accounts, and configuring sharing, which I jumped into in the last session, so we will finish up that discussion there, as well as a Q&A session. So when you log in and go to the launcher, there's the Manage button. So these are the items that we're going to go over today. Currently, your agency managers in their access role have Manage Agency turned on. With their Manage Agency turned on, they will have access to the Overview tab, the Services tab, the Funding tab, Programs, Accounts, and Sites. System admins still only have access, are the only ones with access to assessments, staff, and sharing. If Manage Agency was turned off for your agency managers, they wouldn't have access to this button, so it would look a lot like the end user log in that sense. So just starting off, so agencies. So the agency tab right here has all of your agency information. Right here in your agency overview, you could put the agency address, zip code, continuum of care. We can enable all the client forms, so all those forms that are created in the settings tab, that can be, all of them can be enabled for the agency, or you can assign just certain ones to programs. So if I click this agencies tab, you see your list of agencies. I can switch into Carey agency. You could see here I have it a little more filled out. This agency is also active. You can set up inactive agencies within the database as well. And when you look here, we have all active, and then they would be under inactive. That way, they wouldn't really appear for program enrollments, but they would still be in the system, especially if you want to migrate data over. You could still set up inactive agencies. I'm going to switch back into Carey Test Agency. So I click the switch button. We have our address, the county, zip code. I set up the continuum of your Santa Cruz County COC. If this goes by a different name, just let me know. We can update that in the system. And then the navigation profile is a default. Navigation profiles are assigned by agency. So we also created that Training A navigation profile this morning. So if you wanted all the programs within the Carey Test Agency to use the Training A navigation profile, that's where you would switch that. Also, if there were additional profile screens, this is just setting up the default profile screen for all clients within Carey's Test Agency, right in there. So this is the overview where you can update agency information. You can also switch between agencies over here. So if we want to switch back to systems, say you want to run some like aggregate reports, you can switch back into system that way. I'm going to switch back into Carey Test Agency though. If you want to create a new agency, which we can do right now, we will just go to agencies, click create new agency, and I'm going to put this in as agency A. And then we could put an address, so we'll say 135 Main Street. Then let's say Santa Cruz, California. Could put in the county. County here. You can put in your zip code. The geocode can also go here as well. You can have the continuum of care. If you have multiple continuum cares in your instance, could add more continuum of cares. It's an active agency. Will enable all client forms. I was not sure of the zip code, so I did not fill that out, but everything technically should be fully completed in there. So we have created a new agency. I'm going to go back to agencies, and I'm going to switch into agency A. So now we're in agency A. So this is how you'll create all the new agencies in the system, and as well as if they're active or inactive. And also if you needed to edit any agencies, you could just go back to this list. You can switch in, and if you needed to edit anything, you can edit through there as well. So we're in agency A. And from here, we are going to create some sites. So let's see, I just want to make sure we've covered everything. So sites is where you can manage the agency site locations. By default, we have agency A might appear, but we can create some other agencies. So I'm going to say main site. So if you have a site name, you can add all the sites for the agencies in here. 135 Main Street. And we can just fill this out. And then you can even put in the location manager right here. And the location manager's phone number. You can put in the geocode over here. And this also comes into play with the additional project information for the data standards. It pulls like some of the information. A lot of the information is on the project descriptor page, but like for site addresses, this is pulled from here, as well as an information date. So we're going to add that record. I'm just going to put in a zip. Okay, cool. So now you have a main site right here. You can add as many sites as you would like over here, and these sites can get assigned to the program when they're created in the system. So that is really creating sites. It's pretty straightforward. So you could create all the sites within the agency here, and then they'll be assigned when we set up the program. Next up, we have funding. So funding is something that can be linked when you create services, like if you have financial assistance services, or like how we had that bus pass service on Monday when the client received that service transaction. The amounts can be charged to the client. So what we can do here is you can create funding. So if it's a grant, and this isn't like you can set up the HUD funding sources within the project descriptor. This is like, for any grants or anything that you're drawing money from. So I'm going to say Carrie's grant. I'm going to put that in there. And so we have the total available. You can even put like subgranted amounts. So if you want to create a subgrant of 50,000 or maybe 5,000 to Carrie's test agency, you can add that record right there. And so we have some subgranted funding as well. So the total available is actually 95,000 right there. So that is the funding that we can link up over in the services. And then the next item we'll move into, and if I'm going through anything too quick or anything, just let me know and we can go back to any of the topics. Okay, so the question is, does that play into reporting? Can I run a report for the entire grant? So we do have a few different reports in the system. I'm going to go into the report library. So if we look at like service-based reports, we have a funding source financial detail report. So that's a service-based report, and it shows the funding sources, so primary or subgranted, with like a history of the service transaction for that that range. So that's a report that would show an overview. And let's see. So you can see I'm in agency A, and nothing's going to pop up in here because it's only the programs within agency A. If I were to switch, something cool, when you're setting up users, you could set a default agency for the user. So my default system agency, so I have that arrow so I could quickly switch back to system agency. So I'm in system agency now, and if I run this funding source financial detail report, and I'm going to choose, you could choose no funding source, not based on a funding source, or any funding source, and there'll be a list. So you could choose as many as you want. I'm just going to click any funding sources, include subgrants, and I'm just going to go back to 2016, and I'm going to run that report. And that should generate pretty quick. In the meantime, I'm going to switch back into Agency A. Okay. Oh, and it's processed. So that's the report key where you could process. So not too much has happened in the system, but it does show that it was a service item for the one-way bus pass, and it has the check date and paid and the amount, and it adds everything up right there. Carrie's grant had $100 in it, which was within, I think, the system agency, and now it has only 95. So it shows the current funding totals right there. So there are reports that you can use to view the service transactions related to the funding sources. Okay. So I'm going to click the launcher and go back to manage. And the next up is accounts. So within accounts, this is something else that is linked within the services. Say you have a service like for housing placement, you can add a vendor in here, like say it's a landlord. And you could, when you're configuring the service, which we'll go into, you can turn accounts on, and that way you can select. So I'm just going to say for profit, there's different categories. You could put in the landlord's name. But yeah, so you could use the account for a lot of different items. And we'll just put in a phone number, email, if there's any other information in there. You can fill that out, save changes. So we have a vendor, landlord A. We could also add employers. So I had already added an employer, Carrie's Job Center. We could add another employer, which let's just say this is called Jobs, Jobs, Jobs. So, you can add different employers, and that's great for employment placement services because you could turn on employment placement, and then you could select the employer that the client was placed at. So this is all the configuration that comes into play with that. So you can add in any employers right there. You save changes. So now we have a few different jobs. We have a vendor. So that's really just setting up accounts like vendors and employers that can be linked within service configuration. So that was really that. It's pretty quick to go through those two items. We'll be spending the most time on configuring programs and services. So this just leads up to all of it. Next up, we have configuring assessments and forms. So right over here, we have assessments for the agency. So these are all the tabs within the agency setup. So these you can turn on for assessments you want available within the agency. So we can set up Carrie's Awesome Assessment, Carrie's Favorite Animal Assessment. If you use any of the VI SPDATs, you can set up those assessments as well. So let's just say we want all of the agencies there. We also have any measures. So we remember when we were in the settings, in the templates, we set up a measure for favorite color within the assessment there. And then like the VI SPDAT has all these measures as well that you can turn on to track in the charting. Okay, so all of these assessments are available. If you didn't want, say, the pre-screen for transition age youth for this agency, if it wasn't applicable, you could turn that off. So that is where all of that is managed. We're actually going to look at forms when we do the program setup, which is now. So next up is programs. So this is where programs are configured. So what you do is when you're switched into the correct agency, again, all programs and services are unique to the agency it lives in. So we will add a new program. And I'm going to say this is Carrie's program A. So you can put the program name in there. Then you have your program template. So these are the templates we were looking at before. If it's just a normal COC project, you could click that. If it's a VASH project, you can assign the VASH, and VASH had that automated provisioning, so the services would be added to it as well. What we're going to do, though, is we can use Carrie's training template right there to configure the program. So we also have something called cross-agency services. If this is something you think you would use, we can look more into it. But this is where other providers can place and link their services to your program. So selecting yes allows that functionality. The most common option is no, which allows services only provided to your agency to be assigned to this program. It could get a little complicated if other agencies assign services, especially if they change, it could get messy. So typically that is turned off. Right here you can put in your grant identifier for the program, as well as the funding source. So let's say this program is COC. Let's do a transitional housing program right here. So HUD COC transitional housing. So then the program type would be transitional housing right there. If you had an emergency shelter, right here, when we click save, there's going to be a method of tracking that would appear, and then you would select if it's entry, exit, or night by night, and that only appears for emergency shelters. So that's not on there now, but that is something you would set. And all of these fields fall in line with the program inventory spreadsheet, where all of the agencies and programs can be listed for configuration. So program applicability, put transitional housing, continuum project. Just notice this screen might be looking kind of small. Okay. So we have continuum project. We'll mark that as a yes. Operating start and end date. So you can put the program's operating start and end date. I'm just going to put this that way it's active for a while. We could set it as active if the program's inactive and you just want it there for historical information. You can set that to inactive so clients are not able to be enrolled in the program. The site primary location is the main site. If we created additional sites, then there would be other options as well in there. Site type, we'll do non-residential. Actually, we'll do residential. So we'll select residential. Target population, you can select the appropriate target population. Victim services provider. Housing type, right here. Geocode can be put in as well over here. So this is all stuff, for the AHAR. For program description, you could put in a program description. And that will be seen when the client's enrolled in the program. So there's a little blurb when the client is enrolled that appears. Continuum of care, we have the toggle on for Santa Cruz County COC. If there are multiple COCs in the instance, there'll be multiple toggles that you can turn on and off for whichever the program is applicable to. So over here, we're going to go over the function fields. And this is configuring the program with different functionalities. I showed you from an end user perspective on Monday a few of them. So the first one is auto service placement, and that means the client is automatically provided specified services upon enrollment. Disabling it would disable. So if we turn that on and click save, well, I'm going to add the record just to show you how it appears. We have over here auto service placement, and you can add the service right here. And luckily, so for the Carrie's program template, we did do automated provisioning for case management. So that is already associated with the program. So we can add that, and that means whenever for Carrie's program A, the client will be automatically enrolled in a case management service. And we'll put the service term for 1 day. Over here, you could see a few of the items like funding source and site move down over here. So if the funding source, there needed to be a second funding source, needed to be edited, it could be updated over here. We have our assigned service over here. The site, if you wanted to add an additional site, you can add a second site. Currently, there's only one site configured, but say if you had 5 sites, you could select as many sites as needed, and then you'd be able to set a primary site as well. Since this is a housing program, it's transitional housing, you can add your bed and unit inventory. So I'm going to add that while we're here. So we'll put the information date. You can put the appropriate information date. We have our continuum of care, the household type. So you can select the appropriate household type. I'll do households with at least 1 adult and 1 child. You could do your bed inventory, unit inventory. If you have any veteran beds, you could turn that on, put the bed number. Any youth beds, you could turn that on, put the bed number there. And then you have your inventory start and end dates. So this started November 1st, and let's say it ends, I'll still put that date, and then for HMIS participating, we'll put 50 beds right there. The emergency shelter looks a little different because we have the option where you can select facility voucher based as well. So we'll add that. So then we have also a bed and unit inventory here for the transitional housing program. We have our auto service placement. This is also where you can, as I see a question come in, for programs that were McKinney-Vento, would you make that anywhere? So like regarding funding, you can select the appropriate funding source over here. And then the bed and unit inventory is just, based on the project type. So I'm not sure exactly where it could be marked McKinney-Vento. You can select the appropriate funding source in here. But I don't think there's anything to signify exactly. I'll just put you unmute. Did that answer it?
I don't know, just within Service Point, I know we marked previous old programs that had McKenna-Vento funding. Okay.
Yeah, so we have these funding sources. It's like the active funding sources they're looking at, as well as retired, but there is other, and then you can add other funding sources as well, and so that can be configured.
Okay.
For custom funding. So what we would do is within setup.
Okay.
Field editor, and then you could add to the funding source. So that's special. That's like a special field where you can actually add. Typically, we can't add to core fields, but I think it can be added. Actually, it's showing locked now. I need to check on that. So the only thing I could think of to try to notate that.
Okay.
But I could look into that for you. Okay. So going back to the program setup, you know what I think I did? Well, I did save it, so we are there. But I exited without saving, so that works. So over here, so basically, you can also add documentation requirements here. So this is, say we wanted file category A that we created before and document B, could add that right there. So then when you see the program enrollment, you could click documentation and file category A, B would be listed right over there. So I'm just going to head back up to these function fields. And we were at, so we just did continuum of care, auto service placement. Looks like I skipped over goals. So if we turn on goals, and I'm going to click Save Changes again, and goals will appear. So when we look at goals, that is the goals that we had added in the goal templates. So you can add if you want clients to be enrolled in goals within the program enrollment. Again, this is optional. You can, add the get a job goal on there, and then you would need to, configure that employment service. So it is feasible, but that's where you would add the goals for the client within the configuration. We have the auto service placement, put that service term for 1 day. And then we also, just going down, we have eligibility. So this enables or disables parameters for the program enrollment, such as say like maybe the client must be male or the client must be literally homeless. So if we turn on eligibility, again I'm saving the changes after each one to show the options down here. So then we could add a program eligibility. So again, like say for using assessment scores, we have like the VI SPDAT. So you can add, like this client would only be eligible if they had the VI SPDAT assessment score equals, I'm having trouble thinking of number 15 right now. So, you could just add like different scores, or like it could be based on AMI, demographic based. This is on fields. So say it was for only males, you could do the gender right here, and we'll just add gender, and we could say male. I'll remove the VI SPDAT. So this is where you could set up the gender, the program eligibility, which is helpful within referrals. So the eligibility is turned on. So if you have programs that have specific requirements, public listing. So when public listing is enabled, other agencies can view the program and refer clients to that program. If it's disabled, other agencies cannot refer clients to the program. So this comes into play when you want to make, I'm going to save this real quick, when you want to make the referrals right here. Well, this isn't the actual referral. So if you're in a client and you want to make referrals, you can make the referrals. I'm going to just click test client right here. So with the referrals, then you can view agency A. They have the public listing turned on right there. Carry test agency, I'm not sure if the programs have. Yep, Carry service only training program has the public listing turned on. So if public listings turned on, they would be listed within the referrals right there. I'll go back to the program setup. And so then we have link from history. So turning link from history on allows the user to link a particular service listed in their program history tab to the program. So for example, if it was a standalone service, but then you wanted it connected to the program, you could go to that program history tab and click link from history. So I can show you that. So Prince Charming, his history tab. Let's see. Do you have any standalone services in here? So I don't actually see. It should be here. So I don't think I actually had Link from History turned on for that program, unfortunately. But so I apologize about that. But basically what Link from History does is if you have a standalone service listed in your program history tab, so let me just double check, in your program history tab, then you'd be able to link that a standalone service from history. Unfortunately, I did not turn it on in those programs, but that is how it would work. I'm going to go back to the program setup. Okay, so that's an option if you want the client to be able to link from history. You can turn that on. So these options, program assessments, program notes, program files, program charts, that makes the tabs appear within the program enrollment. So when we're, say, in Prince Charming's services only training program enrollment, right here, there's different tabs. So these tabs were turned on, the assessments, notes, files, forms. They were turned on and within his program setup. So let's see. Need to go back to that. Okay, now we're where everything was saved. So if you want assessments at the program level, you can turn that on. Same with program notes, so it would be at the program level. So it would be a little different from the navigation profile on top. Same thing with files and charts. So that all just provides for that tab to be visible within the program enrollment screen. Auto exit. So this feature eliminates the possibility that a client who is no longer active in the program remains enrolled. So they'll be automatically enrolled from the program if there's no activity in a specified time period. So if we turned on the auto exit and we set it as 15 days, if there is no activity on the client program enrollment 15 days after the last service transaction, then that client would get automatically exited out of the program on the last day of activity. We did discuss in the migration call with Jim that this probably should not be turned on before everything's migrated because it might end date some of your services prematurely if you needed them going on for a while. So this might be something to revisit after everything's migrated right here. So Cascade enrollment data. So this feature enables or disables the data cascade feature. And this allows information to pre-fill based on previous enrollment values, but it's based on the number of days. So if you set it to 60 days, when you enroll a client in a program, it'll pull their previous enrollment data as long as it was in 60 days. So that helps ease the burden of data entry. And then the end user would just need to make sure everything was accurate and update everything as appropriate. Close services upon exit. So I like this this feature. So if close services upon exit is turned on, and when the client's exited out of the program, all services that they have open, so say if it's a long-term service that you set for 30 days, that's still open, it'll get closed when they exit out of the service. So that is a feature I do like to use to make sure there's no pending service items that are still going after the client's exited out. Then we have enable all client forms. So if this is enabled, all the client forms that have been created in the system will appear for the program. You can turn that off, and then if you click Save for that, you can then add the client form that you want. So say we only wanted Carrie's training form, we can add that if we didn't want the other form. So we have that there. So you may have noticed we turned on the program assessments and charts fields up here earlier. So by turning that on, we have the program assessments. So these are where you can add the program assessments that you want associated with the program. So these are all the assessments that were checked off at the agency level, and they're assessments that the client can be entered into at the agency level. But if you want the assessment to be specific to the program, we can fill that in there. So I'm just going to select Carrie's awesome assessment, and then I'm also going to select Carrie's favorite animal assessment. I'm not going to add the VI stats because that is usually done at the agency level and not the program level, but it can be done if you wanted to add the VI stats on there as well. If you wanted to add a chart field, we can add that here. So the chart field I like is the earned income amount because it tracks the client's earned income over each status update. So if you wanted a chart of each increase or decrease of the client's earnings over time within the program enrollment, that's where you would add that. Lastly, though, I am going to turn on auto exit. And just because I wanted to show you a feature in here. So auto exit right here, because when the client's exited out, that will leave the fields blank. So you can add like different exit screen fields here. So like for example, destination here. So say if it's on auto exit for this program and the client's exited, it'll always show the auto exit as other for destination right there. So you can set that up so like certain values would be auto-filled for the exit screen. So that is how you set up a program right here. It's all the different functionalities and everything within the program. So I'm going to click Save Changes. And I'm going to put everyone on mute again, just in case you have any questions related to program configuration setup.
Could you remind me? Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Could you remind me what program applicability is?
Okay. Yep. So this is actually optional. I think it's more of like a legacy field. So if I were to unclick it, it wouldn't say, oh, you need to fill that out. It's still just, I think it's just there for programs like way in the past that had to use program applicability. So you don't technically have to fill that out, but like for other fields, they're required. So it wouldn't let you add it on.
So for the program enrollment cascading, basically bringing forward the old information, does that bring in the system-wide information or just from that same project or program?
It would bring in the client's most recent program enrollment information.
Even if it's outside of the agency?
That's a good question. I think that would be dependent on sharing, but I actually would need to just look into that a little bit more to make sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I just need to play around to double check, but I think it might be, if the system's open, it would take the most recent.
Yeah, okay.
Any other questions?
So with the cascading enrollment data, if the threshold was 60 days, and I guess the last one was, 90 days ago, what would happen then?
It would just show up as they would just need to fill in the information from scratch.
Oh.
Yeah, so it kind of just helps with like data entry, everything. It's just, I think, like, in my opinion, I recommend that the end users be trained to, even when it cascades, to make sure the information's accurate, not just like, oh, yep, everything's auto-filled, because stuff can change between program enrollments. Any other questions? Cool.
For one more question, I guess. For client forms, that's different from assessments?
Yes. So the assessments are like the assessment screens. So we have them set up as like Carrie's awesome assessment, Carrie's favorite animal assessment. So like if I were to go with Prince Charming right here and go into his services only training program, his assessment, well, he has no added assessments. His services only training program isn't that great, but it would have like the assessment there to start. So like he has the status update assessment that can be added. I want to find a better program to use for him. Oh, yep. So I had added in the program setup for Carrie's permanent supportive housing, Carrie's awesome assessment, and right here. So that's like an assessment, and I added like the assessment measures. But for forms, those were the ones we set up in the advanced settings that aren't really like connected
like
to anything. Yeah.
Like the ROI thing. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's like that. So that's the difference between the two, and like within the program setup, in it, you can enable all client forms. So any client form you created in the system would just be added, and you wouldn't have to go through this. But with adding in specific ones, or with program assessments, if you turn on the program assessments, then you could add the specific ones you want associated with the program.
Is there a way to copy a program? So like if I'm setting up two programs that are basically identical except for like the name and maybe like the type?
So there's not a way to just like copy it over, like how the screens have a copy button. There's not a copy button, but that's where templates come into play. So by having this Carrie's training template, every program, when you select, which the second thing it says program template, if you select Carrie's training template, they have the same screen set up, and then they are all have the same service set up. They'll be automatically added with the default goal, get a job, and the documentation and assessments, everything. Okay. So automated provisioning is like almost a way to copy. It's not like a clean copy. You still need to configure stuff in there, but that's the way to do it. Like, so I like it with, say, the RAI programs. Awesome, because there's a ton of RAI services. So it's great to use automated provisioning for like the HUD services. Okay, are there any other questions? Okay, cool. So basically, the rest of the training is going to be going over configuring services, user accounts, and sharing. So services are going to take a bit. So we could break for like a 5-minute break if you'd like, and we'll reconvene at 12:56.
Okay.
So I'll talk to everyone soon.
Cool.
Okay, cool. I hope everyone had a good break. I know it's pretty short. So we're going into the last sections of our training. Before I get started, I just want to check again if there's any other questions before we jump into services and sharing and user accounts. Okay, cool. So what we can get started with now is configuring services. So over here, so when you log into the system and you click manage, we have services right here. So you could see agency A already has a service configured, and that's due to the automated provisioning we had created. And you could see it's assigned only to Carrie's program A. Services can also be filtered by the different categories over here as well. And what we can do is we can add a new service. If you needed to edit a service, you can click the edit button and edit the service as well. But we can create a new service right here. So what we can, let's create maybe a rental assistance program, so a rental assistance service rather. So I'm going to say rental assistance. That's the service title. And we could put this as financial. And I'm going to put residential. So get that. And then we need to add the service items. So all services need service items, or else they won't work. So an example is like how we had the dining hall service that the client was enrolled into, and then we had service items, breakfast, lunch, dinner. So I'm just going to put rent over here. Over here. Yep. So the question is, can we add more categories? Oh, for the, I'm actually going to unmute you to make sure I completely understand.
So how you have the service title and then you have the category financial, are we able to add different categories?
So that would have to be a feature enhancement. So they're currently as is, but actually we do have a rental assistance category that fits better with this one. But I mean, if something doesn't fit, we also have other and no category. For the most part, these categories cover everything though.
Okay.
Cool. So then if you could add your different service items. So I'll do rent. And the delivery type I'm going to put as long-term. So there's 3 different delivery types: long-term, daily attendance, and multiple attendance. And so the difference with these are long-term is for having like extending the availability date for services. So say it's like the rent is from January 1st to January 30th. This also we tend to use a case management service because it could be a one-time, it could be like a one-day thing as well. Daily attendance, that selection is allows you to enter a client on a day-by-day basis. It's possible up to 31 days. And a lot of emergency shelter night-by-night programs use this, as well as food pantry services. And then multiple attendance, that allows you to document attendance for services that are offered multiple times a day. So if there is a service that a client might receive multiple times in one day, this could be set as that. I will note, once a delivery type is set and the service item saved, the delivery type cannot be updated. We'll put a group placement option on. So, for example, we had this turned on when we enrolled SpongeBob and Patrick Star in services. we wanted to enroll them at the same time. So that enables the ability to check off. You could put the start and end date availability of the service. So say you know the service is going to end January 1st, you could put an end availability. I'm just going to put a wide time frame to keep the service active. You can add in the geocode as well. So I put, you know what, actually for services, you could always put the site type as non-residential unless you are putting in an actual housing service, which really is only needed for emergency shelter night by night to track the stays, because we do track the bed and unit inventory at a program level now. So that's my mistake. This should be non-residential because it is services only, even if it is in a housing program. So I'm going to just start this over real quick. So we have our rent, long-term, and then you could put in the geocode. If you don't need to put in the geocode, you could do N/A right there as well, or you can put it in. And you can enable accounts. So if I enable the accounts, I could turn on the vendor account, which we had added in that landlord name. So I'm going to add in vendor right here, and you can make it required or you can make it optional. I'll just put it as required. And this is also where you set up the financial funding options. So if you don't want to be able to charge services, like when we do the service transaction, if you don't want the option to like charge money to a fund, you just put do not charge. If not, you could put no funding source, and the end user could select the appropriate funding source when filling it out. Or maybe it should be automatically charged to Carrie's grant, then you could set it as that. I'm just going to do no funding source. I'm going to put a default amount of $500, but you can leave that blank as well, so it can be filled out by the end user. So I'm going to put 500, but I'm also going to make it adjustable so that 500 can be adjusted a bit. So we have save changes. We have that service item. For program options, this is where you set up which programs the service should be assigned to, or if it should be a standalone service. So services only would make the rent assistance standalone, which means it wouldn't be associated with a program enrollment. It would just be within the agency. Services and programs makes the rent available for standalone as well as associated with programs where it can be provided within the program enrollment or programs only. And then with programs only, you can assign the appropriate programs that should have the service. So there could be, 10 programs listed here, and you could select, say, 5 programs that use this rent assistance program. So I'm just going to select Carrie Program A, so that's the only program we have in the agency. And I'm going to click Save Changes. So what I'm going to do now actually is I'm going to enroll a client. I'm going to enroll Prince Charming into the program we just made, just so we're able to view the services we make. So I'm going into his program. We're in Agency A, so the only available program should be Carrie's Program A. You can see his program history from the other programs. We have the program description we made. We have our funding source. It has full availability. The service categories, they're case management and financial, because those are the services we've set up for the program. You could view the documentation requirements if you like. You could print directions as well. So we have the agency address here, so we can route that. And it is 1 minute because it is heading to a site which has the same address. But that's just a cool way that the Google Maps work. So I'm just going to enroll Prince Charming pretty quickly in this program. So we'll put the start date Monday. You could see we're using the template we made, which used the custom screen. So we have the favorite color on here as well, because we added that to the screen before. We have the Cascade enrollment data working. So that actually answers the question about if Cascade enrollment data works agency to agency. I would say it does, because the Prince Charming's program enrollment was in a different agency. So that does work agency to agency. If there's anything that needs to be updated in here with this Cascade enrollment, then I'm going to just save and close. So we had set up certain items. So we set up automatic service placement. So Prince Charming was automatically placed in case management. And we also set get a job as a goal. So he was automatically assigned to get a job. So with the automated provisioning, we already have case management on there. And now we have rental assistance, because we just configured the rental assistance and the rent service item. So you can see the start date's the 15th. We have the end date, because it's long term. You could set this date range. We have the expense date. You can update that if you'd like. Expense amount, we had set in the service configuration as 500, but let's say we want to adjust it to 600. We could do that because we marked off adjustable. Funding source, we had set to no funding source, so we could have the option to select the appropriate funding source. So I'll select Carrie's grant. If we click and do not charge, this would all disappear. So I'll do Carrie's grant. We enabled accounts within the service configuration. So that is why the vendor is appearing as well. So if I start typing job, oh, actually that's for employer. Sorry, I think we had a landlord. Yep, landlord A. So the auto suggest for landlord A. If we didn't fill it out, we wouldn't be able to provide the service transaction because we marked vendor as required. So if you want to make that optional, just don't check off required within the service configuration. If there's a service note, you could put in the rental assistance note for the service and click submit right there. Cool. And then if you go back to history, you could see right here we have all the information. So in the report, I think it showed something about a check number. This is where if you wanted to edit the report, you could put in the check number as well over here. So that is a service configuration coming into play within the provide services. We can, next, I'm thinking we'll create a standalone service to view. So if we go back to setup, and then we'll go over, sorry, actually we'll go into manage, and then we will go to services, and we can add a standalone service. So let's see, we went over a financial service. So how about an employment placement? And I'm just making this a standalone placement. I'm making this a standalone service just for the sake of showing standalone services, but it could be connected to a program as well. So I'm doing job placement. I'm going to make this employment, and then I'm going to add the record. And then I'm just going to put add item, job placement. I'll do a group placement. We can make that long term as well. And then we'll just put the start and end availability. We don't need to enable accounts because we don't want to use that. We don't need to charge either, so we could turn off the automatically charge. But we do want to turn on employment placement. Since it's an employment category service, this appears after it's saved. We could turn on employment placement. And I'm just going to go back to the main page because I did not fill out the program option. So I just want to make this a standalone service, so it won't be associated with any programs. So I'll change that to services only. I'll save changes. So then when we look within Prince Charming information, say we look at program A, that service isn't going to be there because we didn't assign it to the program. But if we look over here, because we're in agency A and we made it a standalone, we have job placement as a standalone service. And since it is an employment service, it shows the different options right here to fill out. We have 2 employers set up, so I'm gonna type in the beginning, and the employers were added in there. We can put in the information, and then we could say he received a job offer right there. So that is how to set up a standalone service as well as an employment service as well. And then the next service I was thinking we can set up is another dining hall service, because then we can set it up as an attendance service. And that way you can see how to configure services to use for the attendance tool. So I'm going to go to services within the manage button to configure. So I'll go to services. I'm going to put in dining hall. I'm going to make the category food, and I'm going to add that record. And then I'm going to add a few different service items here. This is a service that we can make programs only. I'm just going to make it programs only for carry program A. So we'll add a few different service items. So I'll add in breakfast. And I'm going to do daily attendance because that's the service that's just received 1 time a day. If I turn on the services option, not only will breakfast appear in the attendance tool, but it'll also appear when you're looking within the client program enrollment in the dropdown. Attendance history assist, so this will show clients from the last 4 months. We have manual if you decide to use scan cards, say if you're setting up a housing service for emergency shelter night by night to use scan cards, you could select scanned. Require program enrollment. I'm going to select yes for that. That way clients can only receive the dining hall service if they have a program enrollment. You can also require release of information within attendance services, which is pretty cool. So there is some ROI functionality in the sense if they have a signed ROI and you want to set require release of information, that way they can receive services. Group placement option will turn on as well. And I'm going to just put out the availability and an end date availability. I'm not going to enable accounts, and we don't need to charge. So I'll add that record. I'm going to go back, and I'm going to just add a dinner service item as well. And I'm just filling out basically the same information as the breakfast item. Okay, so we have 2 service items for dining hall. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to go, now all of a sudden the attendance tool appears. It didn't appear before because we had no attendance-based services. So if I click attendance, we have our attendance services configured. So I'll click breakfast. I'm going to search for Prince Charming. Since it's a new service, there are no clients from the last 4 months. So I'm just going to search for him, and I can add him in there. Okay, so a question just came up. So a question, is there a way to set up an alternate ID so clients can be looked up via their service point client ID? We have some anonymous clients that will be migrated. It seems like their service point ID would be the easiest way to look them up. So you can add a alias field onto the client profile screen. So over here, Just opening up a new tab. So you made a copy of the general intake screen, and then you can rename it to a custom way. We have an alias field right here. So when you're doing the custom migration, I don't believe this would be within the HUD CSV, but we can check with Jim on that actually. You could, add the alias, maybe move it up by where the middle name is, and then that could be the designated location for alternate IDs. But I think we would just need to look into that a little further just regarding the migration. And I'm not sure if you can search for clients based on their alias, or if it would just be the unique identifier. I think for searching, it's full name, partial name, date of birth. I'm not sure if you can search by alias. That's another thing I would just need to look into a little bit more. And then I think we would need to touch base with Jim about migrating over the alternate ID. I'm just going to unmute you for a sec to continue.
Yeah.
Did that answer the question?
Yeah, it does.
Okay, cool. Just wanted to make sure I covered it. But we could check with Jim on that, and then I'll check about searching with the aliases. Cool. Okay. So right here, because we required program enrollment, but let's say if I looked up SpongeBob, we can't enroll SpongeBob because he's not enrolled. And then we also can't enroll SpongeBob in the dining hall breakfast service because he's not enrolled. We also can't enroll Patrick Starr because he doesn't even have an ROI, and we're requiring an ROI for the service transaction. So that's how the service configuration comes into play with different permissions. So going back here, I do want to show you regarding the services. So case management, we already created the case management, but just to edit it, we have time tracking turned on, which is great. And then I want to put on adjustable for time tracking right there. So then when you create like a case management service, you can enable time tracking, which I think is an awesome tool. So we turned on the time tracking. I just made it adjustable. So within this enrollment right here, I'm going to go back to Prince Charming's current Program A enrollment. We provide Prince Charming with the case management service. We have the service note, time tracking's on, so we could also put time tracking. So for certain service items, you could turn on time tracking and, log how much time. And that's nice when you go and view it. Like if you want to edit it, you can view and see we had 1 hour, 30 minutes time tracking right there. You can also see how we configured the 2 assessments here. So this is actually going back to the program configuration, but we did do the program assessment, the goals. So even though he did get a job, it's not connected to the program, so we would need to configure it for the program. And this is where we turned on like the notes, the files, the chart. We have put on earned income. So right here we have the earned income at 300, and then if we added a status, it would go. So that's just the program configuration at play with everything. So you can also set up, so again, embedded inventory, we have it so it can be tracked within the program setup. But for night-by-night shelters, I know we still are using housing services. So if you go manage and then you go to your services, you can also set up a housing service. So say we wanted to set up an emergency shelter night-by-night program. You can also then set up a emergency shelter night-by-night service. So let's just say bed night. And then we'll add this as residential. So if you needed to set up housing services, I'm going to set this as daily attendance. I'm going to put bed night there. Do a services option right there. It'll say release of information is required. And then we're just going to do the start and end dates. And then housing options, so you can put in the bed and inventory there as well. So it's emergency shelter, say households without children, facility-based, year-round. And then you could put in, you know, the bed and unit inventory. You could even make reservations through the attendance tool here, which is what I'm going to show you. And then you could also make referral reservations as well. The only issue with making this is we do not have a emergency shelter program set up. So actually what I'm going to do is I'm just going to change this program to emergency shelter just for the sake of making it work with this. Okay. Cool. So we have, now we have an emergency shelters program. So we have a bed night. I'm going to assign right there. And actually, I need to jump back to the program because now that it is an emergency shelter, it didn't save before because method of tracking was required. So I'm going to put night by night because the housing service isn't needed for entry exit. So we have that set up. I'm going to go back to my service. We have it assigned to the bed night right here. And it is also an attendance service. So if we go over here to attendance, we now have the bed night and we have reservation set up. So you'd be able to make a reservation. The only other issue, because I was jumping around, is we did not configure the service fully. So if I'm going to go back to bed night, we have our housing option. We turned on the reservation option, so now we have reservation sections. So I'm going to do section 1, and then you could add in reservation slots. So say you want to do like 10 different slots, and you could make multiple sections. So then we could add section 2. And then I'm just going to do a few slots right here. So then section 2 is this big. Okay, cool. So we set that up. So then if we go back to the attendance tool, now we have a bed night. You can make reservations if you'd like. Right over here, so say slot 1, 30 days to reserve. We're going to search for the client. I'm going to search for Prince Charming. I'm going to select Prince Charming to preview the reservation. He's in slot 1 for 30 days. That's what we set up. You could change the slot number if you wanted, section 1, section 2. You can confirm right there, Prince Charming. And we are looking in the bed view, but you could also look in the calendar view right here. So that's just a little nifty tool. Again, it's optional. You don't need to use reservations or anything. I just wanted to show you how that works. And then also if we looked, so reserved clients, in attendance, we could add him as in attendance. You can, let's see. Oops, because he's already there. I'm going to go back here. So we could change the date. We see the 16th. we could add him in attendance there. So he's checked in, he has it reserved, and now he's checked in. If we go back here to Prince Charming and we look, he has an active service now, right here. And he has attendance for 2 nights because we checked him in for both those nights. And you could see we had the reservation. It shows in the service history, the bed night. So that's just a little function I wanted to show you, that we are able to do like the bed night reservations in there for housing. So we went over how to configure financial services, how to configure employment services, vendors, housing like emergency shelter night by night services. Let's see, are there any questions? I'm going to unmute everyone because I went over a lot of different information in a short amount of time, so we can discuss any questions that may have popped up. Everyone's unmuted right now.
So is that the only way to manage emergency shelters? You don't have like a bed management model where they have a static list of beds that are available and you can see which ones are occupied, like other, like, you know, like Shelter Point.
Okay, so there is the availability model. So within the referral settings, right here, so if we say turned on the queue and we added the program availability management, when you look at availability, and this is something that would need to be updated, you can set, so say Carrie's program A had limited availability, you can add the openings here. And so then it could be viewed like the availability for programs. So when they're like referred from the queue, it would show they're available or not.
Okay.
So we do have availability that way. Yeah, if you have any like technical questions regarding it, it's probably best like we could like discuss it like in Asana, like if any questions you have like written out, and that way we could really research everything and
Yeah,
get you the most knowledgeable.
Yeah, it's just I think we have one of the shelters that's currently actually using Shelter Point and like its fully intended form and using it to manage the beds and seeing who's actually staying in what bed for how long and all of that. So if that's not here, then we're gonna need to come up with a way to have them do that. So.
Okay. Yeah, if you are able to just write out in details like what's needed, and we'll be able to explain like the functionality and to, you know, figure out how to get it to help you figure out how to get it to work.
Okay, definitely.
Yep. Okay, cool. Yeah, we do have the availability tab and then the reservation module. Are there any other questions with service configuration or anything else that we discussed? Okay, cool. So next we could go into sharing. So I'm going to go back to the manage. I'm going to go to sharing. So we have the default template right here. So we can update this. So we want clients full shared, services, programs, assessments, just for the sake of this, basic shared, so agency to agency, they'll see the service, programs, assessments shared. Notes we're setting as not shared across the board. All right, there. So this is if you wanted to update a agency specifically. So, you know, we had our template within the setup here where we set up within the share, we set up a default group for the sharing groups, but then it could be updated agency to agency within the manage. So like say like all of the agencies have a certain sharing, but one just needs to be updated a little bit. That could be updated in there. And then also we have something called agency exceptions here. So an agency exception is created when you need a particular agency to have sharing settings different from the default. So they can be created for individual agencies, and then they could also be created for groups of agencies using the sharing groups over here. So using sharing groups, the system admin can assign separate sharing groups within Clarity Human Services, so allowing them to have a separate network groups. But then we also have these agency exceptions here. So clients created, I'm going to put to system shared, actually, not sharing groups, right there. So the clients are just shared throughout the system. And then you would just go and add the exception right here. And then, so you could just say agency, carry test agency, and add the agency exception for them not to be included with that. So that's how the agency exceptions work. Again, that could get a little tricky, so I don't really recommend using the agency exceptions. But if you have any questions about that, we could look into it in further detail. The other item in here is departmental sharing, which I know we've discussed. I'm going to take away the agency exceptions. So you can enable departmental sharing. And this is another complicated issue, so that's something we could discuss offline as well. So with departmental sharing, if you can create a sharing department, so I'm going to say sharing A, and then what we can do is say within sharing A, we didn't want any services, programs, assessments, place, notes, files for anyone in there. And then what you have to do is after you add that sharing department, sharing group A, then you would need to assign it to whichever program. So program A, we can assign departments right here because we enable that. Then sharing group A, we would, if you wanted it, say also you wanted that case management service to be a part of that sharing department, we could add that there. And then you would need to add your staff. So I'm going to add a staff member because we're going to show you how to add staff members anyway. So the username will be training, and then training staff, and I'm going to just say training at training. So this is how you add staff members. You need to be within your agency, and you can add in the staff. I'm going to give them an agency staff role, auto suggest on. I'm going to just set a password, which then they could click the forgot password to reset. I'm also going to put on their assessment due warning for 5 days. But this is, you can also set it to different days. Cool. So now that that's on, so we created a staff member within agency A. So if we look at staff, she's within agency A. And then if we go down, if we wanted the staff member to have additional agency access, say she also uses Carrie's test agency, we can add Carrie's test agency there. Department is on because we enabled departmental sharing within this agency. So I want to also assign the user to sharing group A. But as you could see, you're only able to add one sharing group. The same holds true for programs and services. So in order to use departmental sharing, you need to ensure that the staff members you want to have access to those programs and services are also assigned to the sharing department. They can only be assigned to one sharing department, as well as the programs and services. So that is a quick overview of how departmental sharing works. You can also, another cool tool within sharing is agency documents. So you could add any documents. So say you have like an agency data sharing agreement, MOU, partner agency agreement. You can add these onto the agency just so, and then they will show up as PDFs. So let's say a data sharing agreement. I'll do the test file. Right there. And then now you have a data sharing agreement attached to that agency. So one sharing department per agency or total. That would be per agency because the staff profile is there's just one staff profile. And then, you can set like their default agencies that they have, but even though they have access to two, they really just have the one staff profile. So it would just be one department. Right there. Cool. So just to reiterate with the sharing, you can set up your sharing templates within setup sharing groups. So you could set up how you would want that to be in there. And then, so if the agencies are all using the default sharing group, like throughout the system, you have that set up. And then if anything needs to be tweaked, you can then go into manage sharing. And I recommend just double checking to make sure everything's correct anyway. And so right now it's set like basic shared, program services assessments, and then the notes, files, locations are not shared agency to agency, but clients created are system shared for agency A. Also, for releases of information, it's using the system default, but if you decide to do ROI agency to agency, this is where you would configure it for the agency. But it can just be based on the system. So if we're going back to setup ROI, right here we have it set default models none right now, but it can be set system. That way, it's for the system and not agency to agency. So I believe we've gotten through everything on the list. I'm just going to double check this. Yep, it looks like we went through all of the topics on the agenda. So I'm going to unmute everyone. And, if you have any questions, and I know I went through everything really quick. It's a lot of material to get through over 3 sessions. So I'm just going to unmute and we can just have a Q&A session. Okay, cool. Everyone's unmuted.
"14 agencies, and then we have. Sorry.
Sorry, Javier. I think I just unmuted you. I thought it was muted, and then something happened.
Yeah, no problem. I said we have about 14 agencies, I think, somewhere around there. And then we have I think it's 40-something programs. And then they're each going to be set up underneath each agency. There's no way to standardize the services across all of the agencies without doing it manually, correct?
Yep. So if you have services that are going to be used for every single program, you can use automated provisioning. So that works cross agency. So say you have all of your programs use case management, and they're all the ones that are using the COC template. You can enable automated provisioning within the set up. Oh, I just got logged out again. I don't know why. Okay. So within your templates right here, say COC for all of your programs that are using the 2017 COC project, you can enable automated provisioning, and then you can configure services in here. And every time a program you create is assigned this 2017 COC project, they're also going to be assigned those services.
Okay. Okay. That makes things easier. Just FYI, what we did is we basically give them a list of all the services that they're currently tracking in Service Point, and we're basically consolidating that and making it so that similar services are grouped into new services. But then all those services are going to be available to all the agencies. So we're just trying to make sure that we can do it consistently.
Oh, cool.
Easy.
Yeah, that sounds very organized. I'm excited to see the finished product with that. And also, like, I know, like, we went over the configuration templates, like, especially with those custom services. So if you have a preferred way you'd rather provide us with the custom services that within the agency that we are configuring, just let us know. You don't need, like, I would say the program configuration template, like, should definitely be followed, but if you have a different way you want to provide us with those services, like, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yep. Cool. So any other questions? Okay, cool. So I have everyone set up in the training site. Please let me know if you have any issues like resetting your password, trying to log in, and I can help you. I could just, you know, over the phone give you a temporary password that could be reset if you're having any issues using the forgot password link. I can help you out with that. So anything else you'd like to go over? We have some time left.
For the access roles, I saw that data analysis is one of the options. Does that so like you had data analysis turned off? If we turned them off and turned it on, does that mean that they can use the standalone instance of Looker, or does that mean that does that have any change, or will that affect the license that's being used? How does that work?
Yeah, so the data analysis, that is for the Looker Clarity interface. So like as system admins, you have access to the standalone Looker, but I believe the agency managers are going to have access to the standalone interface. Yeah, they won't have, like, the agency managers, I don't think they're going to have access to actual Looker, and I would need to confirm that.
Yeah.
But they have, so like the system admins are able to create the queries and everything in Looker, and then the agency managers, when data analysis is turned on, that will give them that Clarity Looker interface. And yep, I see, like, agency managers get the analysis tab within Looker.
Okay.
Yep. So we don't have it on in Santa Cruz Train just because it's not going to be on in Santa Cruz Train, but it's turned on with the live site.
Okay. And then you guys had an issue with the built-in Looker implementation, where you could not save or create dashboards without using the full Looker interface. Do you know if that's been resolved?
You know, I'm not too sure.
That's probably a question for the assignment board. But
yes, yes, and I definitely, like, we could, like, touch base with Jim on that. He would have a answer for that for sure.
That's all the questions I have. I don't know if Emma or Madel have any.
not at this point. I mean, once I start actually playing more within the system, I think things might come up then.
Okay, cool.
For non-managers or regular users to see the history of something that was answered. So, for example, if a veteran is listed as no, would they be able to see if like the audit trail for that or anything like that?
I think it's only system admins, but you know what? I'm gonna check right now because I have like those agency manager one user set up. So if I go into like say carry training, which is that's an agency staff. I think it's really only system admins that would be able to see the audit trail, but let's see. So yeah, like I don't see like a log down there.
Okay.
But yeah, that's a special system admin thing. Check the manager. Oop. This user hasn't really been doing much. Yeah, there's no like that's more of a system admin feature. And then there's also like, you know, some tools that well, especially like the manager also has access to these agency management. So you could see like a staff client data activity report, which is pretty cool. So you could, you know, view profile created, edited, like stuff that the users do in there. So there are ways for like agency managers to track. Even though there's not much to track for any of those users. But, you know, there will be in a live site.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, cool. Any other questions?
Is mine mentioned?
Cool. So I think I mentioned this